There are many things we do not choose in life. Where we are born, the family we are given, the burdens we must carry before we are strong enough to bear them. Some of you know exactly what I mean. You faced hardship when you were still too young to understand it. You were given trials that seemed far too great for a child. And now, perhaps, you wonder why. Let me tell you something that may surprise you. If you have suffered greatly in your childhood, God is greatly calling you. You see, there are two ways to interpret suffering. The first is to believe it is meaningless, a cruel accident, a stroke of bad luck. But there is another way, a deeper way, a truer way. It is to believe that suffering is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a great calling. God never wastes pain. What he allows, he uses. If you have known loneliness, he may be preparing you to understand the hearts of the lonely. If you have walked through darkness, he may be shaping you into a light for others. If you have been broken, he may be calling you to help mend the broken. Look at the great figures in history, those who changed the world, those who lifted others from despair. You will not find many who had easy beginnings. No, you will find orphans, outcasts, those who were rejected, those who were wounded before they had even begun to fight. And yet, these were the ones whom God called. These were the ones who rose, not in spite of their trials, but because of them. So what does this mean for you? It means that your pain is not the proof of God's absence, but the evidence of his plan. It means that your wounds may one day become your wisdom. And it means, above all, that your story is far from over. If you have faced suffering in childhood, then hear this. God is calling you, not just to survive, but to rise, not just to endure, but to lead, not just to understand your pain, but to use it for good, for others, for him. And if he is calling, what will your answer be? Suffering in childhood is often seen as an unfair burden, a cruel twist of fate that leaves wounds long before a person is strong enough to carry them. It is natural to wonder why such things happen, why some children grow up in the warmth of love and security, while others face hardships they never asked for. But what if suffering in childhood is not a meaningless tragedy, but a sign of something greater? What if it is not a curse, but a calling? From the very beginning, life is full of challenges. A child who grows up in hardship may face neglect, loss, loneliness, or even betrayal by those who were meant to protect them. These experiences can leave deep scars, shaping how a person views the world and themselves. They may grow up feeling unwanted, unworthy, or invisible, carrying pain that lingers long into adulthood. And yet, throughout history, some of the most remarkable individuals, those who changed the world, who lifted others, who brought wisdom and hope, were the very ones who suffered in their youth. Why is this? One reason is that suffering at an early age forces a person to ask questions that others do not. While some may go through life without ever questioning its deeper meaning, those who suffer are often pushed to seek answers. Why did this happen? What is the purpose of pain? What is my place in the world? These are not easy questions, and they do not always lead to immediate comfort, but they awaken something in a person, a depth of thought, a desire to understand, and often a sense that their life must mean something more. Suffering also creates a certain strength that cannot be developed any other way. A person who has faced hardship as a child learns resilience, even if they do not realize it at the time. They learn to survive, to endure, to keep going, even when everything around them seems against them. This inner strength is often unnoticed in the moment, but it becomes evident later in life when challenges arise. Those who have suffered in childhood often have a quiet perseverance, a deep well of endurance that carries them through difficulties that might break others. But perhaps even more importantly, suffering creates understanding. A person who has known rejection recognizes the pain of being cast aside. One who has experienced loneliness understands the silent cries of those who feel unseen. Someone who has walked through fear knows what it means to long for security. This kind of understanding cannot be taught in books or learned through comfort. It is forged in the fire of experience, and it is this understanding that allows a person to connect with others in a way that is deep, real, and transformative. Many of the most compassionate, wise, and selfless individuals in history were shaped by early suffering. They were not hardened by it, but rather softened, made more aware of the needs of others, more willing to step in where others turn away, more attuned to the struggles that go unnoticed by those who have never known them firsthand. They became leaders, healers, mentors, and voices for those who could not speak for themselves. Their suffering became a source of purpose, guiding them toward a path they might never have found otherwise. But there is another side to suffering, one that is harder to face. Not everyone who suffers in childhood finds purpose in it. Some are crushed by it. Some grow bitter, believing that their pain is proof of the world's cruelty, that there is no meaning, no hope, no reason to believe in anything beyond what they have endured. It is understandable. Pain has a way of closing the heart, of making trust seem foolish and love seem distant. But the truth is that suffering does not have to destroy a person. It can also refine them. It can break, but it can also build. And the difference often lies in whether a person chooses to see their pain as the end of their story or the beginning of something greater. God does not waste suffering. If he allows it, he also uses it. This is not to say that he causes pain for his own purposes, but rather that he is able to take what is broken and make it into something beautiful. The very things that seem like a curse in childhood can become the foundation for a greater calling. The lonely child may grow up to be the one who creates a home for the abandoned. The fearful child may become the one who leads others to courage. The one who suffered in silence may one day be the voice for those who cannot speak. Many times, a person does not recognize the meaning of their suffering until much later. They may go through years of wondering why things happened the way they did, struggling with wounds that seem to have no purpose. But then, at some point, they find themselves in a situation where their past pain allows them to help someone else in a way no one else could. And in that moment, they realize that their suffering was not wasted. It was preparing them, it was shaping them for a calling they could not yet see. There is a kind of wisdom that comes only through suffering. It is the wisdom that knows life is not always fair, but that fairness is not the measure of its worth. It is the wisdom that understands that pain does not mean a person is unloved or forgotten, but rather that they are being prepared for something beyond what they can see. It is the wisdom that sees suffering not as a punishment, but as a hard path, but one that leads to something greater. If you have suffered in childhood, you may wonder what it means for your future. You may believe that your pain has set you apart in a way that only leads to more loneliness, more struggle. But what if, instead, it has set you apart for a reason? What if the very things that hurt you most are the things that will allow you to help others in a way no one else can? What if your suffering is not a mark of misfortune, but a sign that God is calling you to something more? The greatest figures in history, those who changed the world, who lifted others, who made a difference, were rarely those who had easy lives. They were the ones who suffered, who struggled, who faced trials that could have broken them. But instead of breaking, they rose. And because they rose, they lifted others with them. Your suffering does not define you, but it does shape you. And how you choose to see it will determine what you do with it. You can allow it to make you bitter, or you can allow it to make you better. You can see it as a curse, or you can see it as a calling. And if it is a calling, then the question is not, why did this happen, but rather, what am I meant to do with it? Because if you have suffered, then you have been given something that many others do not have: an understanding, a strength, a depth that can be used for something far greater than you ever imagined. Pain is an unwelcome teacher, yet it imparts lessons that comfort never could. It is natural to seek ease, to desire a life free from hardship, and to believe that happiness comes from the absence of struggle. But the reality is different. Comfort may offer temporary relief, but it rarely brings depth, wisdom, or strength. It is through pain that a person truly learns, not just about the world, but about themselves, about others, and about the deeper truths that shape existence. When life is comfortable, there is little reason to question or search for meaning. Everything flows smoothly, and there is no urgency to understand suffering, no need to ask difficult questions, no pressing desire to grow. Comfort allows a person to remain as they are, content with what they know and unwilling to go beyond the surface. But pain forces movement. It pushes a person beyond their limits, beyond what they thought they could bear, and in doing so, it reveals truths that would have remained hidden in ease. Pain teaches the reality of endurance. It strips away illusions about what a person can and cannot handle. In moments of suffering, there is a choice. to give in, or to press forward. And in pressing forward, something remarkable happens. A person discovers that they are stronger than they thought. They learn that they can survive, that they can keep going, even when everything in them wants to stop. This realization does not come through comfort. It comes only through struggle, through facing difficulties that demand perseverance. Pain also reveals what truly matters. In times of suffering, the distractions of life lose their hold. The things that once seemed so important, status, material possessions, fleeting pleasures, fade into the background. A person in pain sees with clarity what is real and lasting. They begin to value love over luxury, character over convenience, depth over superficiality. They recognize the worth of genuine relationships, of kindness, of things that cannot be bought or measured. Comfort rarely forces this kind of reflection, but pain does. It strips away what is unnecessary and leaves behind only what is essential. Through pain, a person learns empathy. It is easy to look at others from a distance and judge their struggles when one has never suffered in the same way. But when pain comes personally, it changes perspective. A person who has experienced heartbreak understands the silent sorrow of another. One who has faced loss knows the ache of grief. Someone who has battled through darkness recognizes the signs of despair in those around them. Pain deepens compassion, making a person more attuned to the suffering of others. It teaches that every individual carries burdens unseen, and this awareness leads to kindness that is genuine, not forced. Pain also forces growth. It demands change because staying the same is no longer an option. A person who has been through deep suffering does not emerge unchanged. They either become bitter or stronger, closed off or more open. The experience of pain forces a choice, to let it harden the heart or to let it refine the soul. Comfort never requires such a decision. It allows stagnation, the illusion that growth is unnecessary. But pain makes it clear that change is inevitable. And for those who choose to let it shape them rather than break them, pain becomes a tool for transformation. There is a kind of wisdom that only comes from pain. It is not the knowledge found in books or in words passed down by others. It is the wisdom that is felt, lived, and earned through experience. It is the understanding that life is not always fair, but fairness is not the highest goal. It is the realization that strength does not come from avoiding hardship, but from enduring it. It is the knowledge that true joy is not found in the absence of suffering, but in the ability to find meaning in it. Pain teaches humility. When everything is going well, it is easy to believe that success is entirely self-made, that strength is natural, and that struggles belong only to others. But suffering shatters that illusion. It reminds a person of their limits, their weaknesses, their dependence on something greater than themselves. It humbles the proud, softens the self-sufficient, and brings an awareness that no one is invincible. This lesson is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Without it, arrogance grows unchecked, and true connection with others becomes impossible. Pain refines character. It tests integrity in ways that comfort never could. In difficult times, a person's true nature is revealed, not in words but in actions. Do they remain honest when dishonesty would bring relief? Do they show kindness when their own suffering makes it difficult? Do they stay true to their values when everything around them tempts them to compromise? Comfort does not challenge a person in these ways. It does not demand proof of character, but pain does. And for those who choose integrity in the midst of suffering, the result is a strength that cannot be easily shaken. Suffering also teaches reliance. It exposes the limits of human effort and control. There are moments when no amount of strength, intelligence, or determination can change a situation. In these moments, a person is faced with a choice: to fall into despair or to turn to something beyond themselves. Pain has a way of bringing people closer to God, not because it forces belief, but because it reveals need. It breaks down the illusion of self-sufficiency and opens the heart to the possibility of something greater. This is a lesson that comfort rarely teaches, because when life is easy, it is tempting to believe that nothing beyond oneself is necessary. Pain also teaches gratitude. It is a strange paradox that those who have suffered deeply often appreciate life more than those who have not. When a person has known what it means to lose, they cherish what they have. When they have walked through darkness, they appreciate the smallest glimmers of light. When they have felt hunger, physical or emotional, they do not take provision for granted. Comfort often breeds complacency, a tendency to overlook blessings because they are expected. But pain strips away that expectation and replaces it with a deep appreciation for even the simplest joys. There is no denying that pain is difficult. It is something no one seeks, yet no one escapes. But for those who are willing to learn from it, pain becomes a teacher like no other. It teaches endurance, reveals what truly matters, deepens empathy, forces growth, imparts wisdom, humbles the heart, refines character, strengthens faith, and fosters gratitude. These are lessons that comfort rarely offers, yet they are the very lessons that shape a person into who they are meant to be. God's calling often comes in ways that are unexpected, unnoticed, and even disguised as something entirely different. It does not always arrive with clear instructions or a grand revelation. Instead, it often appears in the form of challenges, setbacks, or ordinary moments that at first glance seem insignificant. Many people wait for a dramatic sign, something unmistakable that points them in the right direction. But God's ways are not always direct. His calling is often hidden within experiences that seem unrelated, within struggles that feel meaningless, and within circumstances that do not appear to hold any great purpose. There is a common belief that when God calls a person, the path will be clear and the purpose will be obvious. But history and scripture show a different pattern. Many of the greatest figures who were called by God did not immediately recognize His hand in their lives. They were placed in situations that seemed ordinary or even unjust. They faced difficulties that felt like obstacles rather than opportunities. Yet, through these very experiences, they were being prepared for something greater. What seemed like delay was actually development. What felt like suffering was actually shaping. What appeared to be rejection was in reality redirection. Moses was raised in Pharaoh's palace, far removed from the suffering of his people. He had status, privilege, and power. Yet, when he tried to take justice into his own hands, he was forced into exile, spending years in the wilderness as a shepherd. To the outside world, it may have seemed like his life had lost its direction, that he had fallen from a place of influence to a life of obscurity. But it was in that very wilderness that he was prepared for his true calling. The years spent leading sheep were not wasted time. They were a disguised training ground for leading a nation. His calling did not come as an immediate assignment, but was hidden within years of experiences that, at first, seemed unrelated to his ultimate purpose. Joseph's story follows a similar pattern. As a young man, he had dreams of greatness, yet instead of rising quickly to a position of honor, he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned. Each of these events seemed like misfortune, a series of injustices that led him further away from any meaningful future. Yet every setback was a step toward his true purpose. The years spent as a servant and a prisoner were not wasted. They developed his wisdom, his leadership, and his ability to navigate complex situations. When the time came for him to step into his calling, he was not only ready but uniquely equipped in ways he could never have imagined. His hardships were not interruptions, but preparations, though they did not appear that way at the time. This pattern repeats throughout history. Those who are called often do not realize it in the moment. They find themselves in places they never expected to be, facing trials they never asked for. They wonder why their lives have taken unexpected turns, why their efforts seem to lead to closed doors, why they feel hidden rather than seen. Yet, in the very experiences that seem to be obstacles, God is at work. He does not always reveal the purpose immediately, because true preparation takes time. A calling is not simply about reaching a destination. It is about becoming the person who is capable of fulfilling that purpose. Many people miss God's calling not because He is silent, but because they are looking in the wrong place. They expect something obvious, something that fits their own idea of what a calling should look like. But God rarely calls people in the way they expect. He often speaks through difficulties, through responsibilities that seem small, through moments of service that go unnoticed. The very place where a person feels overlooked may be the place where they are being shaped. The very struggle that seems pointless may be the very thing that strengthens them for what is ahead. The very detour they did not plan for may be leading them exactly where they need to be. God's calling is often disguised as perseverance. There are seasons when nothing seems to be happening, when efforts feel fruitless, when progress is invisible. Yet, in these seasons, something deeper is taking place. Growth is occurring beneath the surface, unseen but essential. The lessons learned in silence, in waiting, in enduring, these are the lessons that prepare a person for a future they cannot yet see. It is easy to become discouraged when life does not seem to be moving in the direction one hopes, but God does not waste time. Every moment, even the ones that seem empty, is part of a larger plan. There are times when God's calling is disguised as discomfort. He does not always lead through ease, but often through challenges that force a person to grow. A comfortable life does not require much faith, but a life of purpose demands stepping into the unknown. Many resist change, fearing uncertainty, yet it is often in the moments of discomfort that God is calling a person to something greater. When everything seems unsettled, when the familiar is no longer secure, when the path forward is unclear, these are often the moments when a person is being prepared for something beyond what they would have chosen for themselves. God's calling is also disguised as service. Many expect their calling to be about recognition, about doing something that feels significant, but often it begins in the unseen, in the quiet acts of faithfulness that seem small. It is in helping others, in showing kindness without expectation, in being faithful with what is given, no matter how small, that a person is prepared for greater responsibility. Those who are willing to serve in the unnoticed places are often the ones God entrusts with greater purpose. It is not about status, but about the heart. A person who is faithful in little is ready for more when the time comes. Another disguise that often hides God's calling is rejection. Many times the doors that close are just as much a part of God's plan as the doors that open. It is easy to feel discouraged when opportunities are lost, when paths do not lead where expected. But what seems like rejection is often protection. It is not a sign of failure, but of direction. When something does not work out, it is not because God has forgotten, it is because He is leading towards something better. The closed doors are just as important as the open ones. God's calling is rarely obvious in the moment. It is often hidden in ordinary days, in struggles that feel unnecessary, in paths that seem to lead nowhere. Yet, nothing is wasted. Every experience, every challenge, every unexpected turn is part of a larger story. Those who are willing to trust, to keep moving forward even when they do not understand, are the ones who eventually see how it all fits together. The calling is there even when it is not recognized. It is not always about grand moments, but about daily faithfulness. And in time, what once seemed disguised becomes clear.